The air at Kadena Air Base is thick, heavy with the humidity of the Okinawa night, but inside the pressure suit, the only reality is the rhythmic hiss of pure oxygen and the claustrophobic embrace of the helmet. You are strapped into the cockpit of something that looks less like an aircraft and more like a dagger carved from the void of space itself. This is the SR-71 Blackbird. It is not merely a plane, it is a weapon of pure physics, a titanium needle designed to sew through the fabric of the atmosphere at speeds that turn air into fire. On the tarmac, the beast is weeping. Droplets of JP-7 fuel, a rare and volatile nectar that requires a match lit by trithylborane to even burn, seep through the unsealed joints of the fuselage. It is a design feature, not a flaw. The metal skin is designed to expand under the hellish heat of Mach 3, sealing the gaps only when the friction of the air turns the hull into a blast furnace. You are sitting on a bomb that leaks, waiting to light the fuse. The start sequence is a violence of its own. Twin Buick Wildcat V8 engines, mounted on carts below the wings, scream as they spin the massive J58 turbojets to life. The sound is a physical blow to the chest, a rising shriek that tears the night apart. Inside the cockpit, the vibration rattles your teeth, blurring the instruments until the engines settle into a low, predatory idle. You are the pilot of the Sled, the Habu, the Blackbird. You are about to leave the world of men and enter a domain where the sky turns black and the sun is a hard, unblinking eye. The mission is simple in words, suicidal in practice. Fly over hostile territory, capture the secrets that want you dead, and outrun the missiles they will send to kill you. You have no guns. You have no missiles of your own. Your only defense is speed. Absolute, blistering, godlike speed. You roll out to the runway, the nose pitching up like a cobra. The afterburners ignite with a kick that pins you against the ejection seat. Green flames, colored by the TEB ignition fluid, shoot 50 feet behind you. Diamonds of shockwaves forming in the exhaust. The Blackbird tears down the runway, not lifting so much as leaping away from the earth, rejecting the ground that tries to hold it. The ascent is vertical, or feels like it. You punch through the cloud layer in seconds, the gray mist vanishing into a blinding blue that deepens rapidly to purple, then indigo, and finally the infinite black of the stratosphere. You are at 80,000 feet. The curve of the earth is visible, a fragile blue crescent below. Up here, you are untouchable by weather, by fighters, by the petty concerns of the surface, but you are not alone. The radio crackles. It is the RSO, Reconnaissance Systems Officer, sitting in the dark hole behind you. He is your eyes, your navigator, the man who watches the electronic demons. We are approaching the target zone. The silence of the edge of space is deceptive. Outside, the air temperature is minus 60 degrees, but the skin of the windshield is searing hot, over 600 degrees Fahrenheit, cooked by the friction of your passage. You are flying inside an oven. The air conditioning fights a losing battle against the heat. You can feel it radiating through the suit. If you were to touch the glass with a bare hand, your flesh would sizzle and fuse to it. You are a biological anomaly in a machine built for demons. We are crossing the line. The target is North Vietnam, or perhaps it is the Kola Peninsula, or the jagged coast of Libya. The geography changes, but the hatred remains the same. Below you, thousands of eyes are watching radar screens. They see a blip moving at a speed that defies logic. They panic. Alarms scream in bunkers buried deep underground. Fingers fumble for keys, for buttons. They have been waiting for you. The SA-2 guideline missiles, telephone poles packed high explosives and hate are tracking you. The RSO's voice is calm, detached, a contrast to the adrenaline flooding your veins. Launch indication. 6 o'clock. This is the battle. This is the duel. A missile battery against a titanium bird. You do not turn. You do not jink. To turn at this speed is to bleed energy, to die. You do the only thing the Blackbird knows how to do. You push the throttles forward. The J58 engines gulp air, the inlet spikes retracting to swallow the shockwave, transforming the engine into a ramjet. The Mach meter Ms 3.0, 3.01, 3.2. The missile is climbing, a pillar of fire rising from the jungle floor, desperate to intercept you. It is fast, Mach 5, but it has to climb through thick air, fighting gravity, fighting drag. You are already high, already fast, surfing the thin air at the edge of the envelope. The warning lights on the dashboard flash red. The missile is tracking. It calculates an intercept point. It thinks it knows where you will be. But the Blackbird is a liar. You accelerate. The plane shudders, groaning under the thermal stress. The expansion joints seal tight. The aircraft lengthens by several inches as the metal swells. You are flying a living thing that thrives on pain. The missile burns out, its motor exhausted, exploding harmlessly miles behind you. A puff of dirty gray smoke in a vast, pristine sky. You don't even see it. You only see the blue light on the panel that says the threat is gone. You have just outrun death. But every mission is a clean getaway. There are stories whispered in the officers' clubs, tales of the days when the luck almost ran out, like the time over Vietnam when the air was so thick with lead it felt like you could walk on it. The North Vietnamese were learning. They fired salvos, not single shots. A grid of fire. Dennis Sullivan knew this better than anyone. He was flying a mission, the cameras clicking away, capturing the movement of troops, the placement of supplies. The RSO called it out. Multiple launches. Not one, not two. The sky lit up. Sullivan pushed the bird, the engines screaming, wing, but one missile, a newer variant, tracked true. It didn't need to hit you to kill you, it just needed to get close. The warhead detonated. A shockwave of shrapnel tore through the thin air. For a fighter jet, it would have been over. Wings sheared off, fire along spiral down. But the Blackbird is tough. A piece of jagged metal from the explosion slammed into the wing. It sliced through the titanium honeycomb, burying itself deep in the structure. The bird lurched. The warning lights lit up like a Christmas tree. Fuel pressure dropping. Hydraulic warnings. Sullivan fought the stick, wrestling the wounded beast. The Mach number held. The altitude held. He nursed it back. Miles of hostile territory slipping beneath the wounded wing. When they landed it, the ground crew found the metal shard. It was a piece of the missile's fusing mechanism, lodged inches from the fuel tank. A few inches to the left, and the Blackbird would have been a fireball over Hanoi. That is the razor's edge. Then there was Libya. 1936. Tensions were at a boiling point. The United States had struck targets in Tripoli, and Gaddafi was furious. He drew a line of death in the Gulf of Sidra, daring anyone to cross it. Brian Shul and Walter Watson crossed it. They were there to take pictures, to see the damage, to prove that the line of death was just a line on a map. They came in fast, screaming over the Mediterranean, the cameras rolling. As they turned back, the Libyan defenses woke up. These weren't the old SA-2s. These were SA-5 Gammons and potentially newer Soviet exports. Fast, nasty things. Shul saw the launch light. Watson confirmed it. They were bracketed. Missiles from the left, missiles from the right. The standard procedure was to accelerate, but they were already in a turn, bleeding speed. The engines were on the verge of an unstart, a violent airflow disruption that causes the aircraft to yaw wildly, slamming the pilot's helmet against the canopy. An unstart at this speed, with missiles inbound, Shul had a choice. Follow the book and risk the unstart, or throw the book away. He shoved the throttles to the stops. He demanded more from the engines than they were rated to give. The exhaust temperature gauges redlined. The speed climbed. Mach 3.3. Mach 3.4. The Blackbird roared. It wasn't just flying, it was fleeing. The airframe groaned, the titanium stretching to its absolute limit. The vibration was so intense the instrument blurred. Mach 0.5. That is 2,600 miles per hour. They were moving faster than a rifle bullet. The missiles were good, but they were chasing a ghost. The Blackbird simply outran the geometry of the intercept. The warheads detonated miles astern, their fury wasted on empty air. Shul and Watson coasted out over the Mediterranean, the silence returning, the only sound the heavy breathing in their headsets. They had flown faster any human beings had ever flown in an operational aircraft. They had looked the devil in the eye and left him in the dust. But the Blackbird was more than just terror and adrenaline. It was a creature of moments of surreal, quiet beauty that no other pilot would ever know. Imagine coasting across the United States in 68 minutes. You take off from the West Coast, and before you have finished your first cup of coffee from the tube in your helmet, you are descending over the East Coast. You see the sun rise in the west because you are flying faster than the rotation of the Earth. You can make the sun stand still. You can chase the sunset and hold it on the horizon, a prisoner of your speed. There is the story of the speed check, a legend that defines the arrogance and the glory of the Sled Driver. It was a slow day in the LA Center airspace. The radio frequency was cluttered with the chatter of pilots. A Cessna asked for a ground speed readout, 90 knots. Controller replied, a humble speed. Then a Twin Beach, feeling superior, asked for his speed, 120 knots. A subtle brag. Then, the inevitable Navy F-18 Hornet, the hotshot in his multi-million-dollar fighter, keyed the mic. He wanted to show off. Center, Dusty 52. Ground speed check. The controller, bored but professional, replied. Dusty 52, showing 620 knots across the ground. It was a challenge, a gauntlet thrown down. In the cockpit of the SR-71, Shul and Watson looked at each other. They were flying at 80,000 feet, screaming across the desert. They hadn't said a word on the radio. They were ghosts. But the pride of the Sled Driver is a heavy thing. Watson keyed the mic. His voice was calm, distinct, the voice of a man who knows he is holding 4 aces. Center, Aspen 20, you got a ground speed readout for us? The controller didn't miss a beat. He knew what was happening. Aspen 20, I show you at 1,842 knots across the ground. Silence. The radio frequency went dead. The Navy pilot said nothing. The king of speed had spoken. There was no need to say more. It wasn't a battle of missiles, but it was a victory nonetheless. A reminder that there are levels to this game, and the Blackbird sat alone at the top. The engineering required to keep this bird in the air was a battle in itself. The engineers at Skunk Works, led by the legendary Kelly Johnson, had to invent the technology to build it. They couldn't use aluminum. It would melt. They needed titanium, but the US didn't have enough high-grade titanium. The Soviet Union did. In a twist of irony that would make a spy novelist blush, the CIA set up shell companies to buy the titanium from the Russians, only to build the plane that would spy on them. Every bolt, every rivet, every panel was forged from the metal of the enemy. The hydraulic fluid had to be invented because normal fluid would vaporize. The tires were filled with nitrogen and infused with aluminum powder to reflect the heat. The camera windows were made of pure quartz, fused to the frame ultrasonically because glass would shatter. Flying it was a physical ordeal. You wore a full pressure suit, identical to the ones astronauts wore on the Gemini missions. You were essentially a spaceship pilot pilot who never left the atmosphere. If the cockpit depressurized at 80,000 feet, your blood would boil in your veins. The suit was your cocoon, your lifeline. You drank water through a tube. You ate protein paste through a port in the helmet. You sat in a tiny, cramped seat for hours, monitoring systems that were constantly trying to kill you. The unstart was the constant boogeyman. The engine inlets were designed to slow the supersonic air down to subsonic speeds before it hit the turbine face. A movable spike in the nose of the engine managed this shockwave. If the spike was off by a millimeter, the shockwave would be expelled, the engine would loosen instantly, and the aircraft would violently yaw. It felt like hitting a brick wall at 2,000 miles per hour. Your helmet would smash into the side of the cockpit. Your neck would snap if you weren't braced, and you had to fix it manually while falling out of the sky, resetting the spike, restarting the engine, all while the ground rushed up to meet you. Despite the danger, despite the physical toll, the pilots loved her. They loved the power. They loved the view. There is a spirituality to high-altitude reconnaissance. You are detached from the squalor of the world. You see the planet as a single, fragile organism. You see the pollution clouds over cities, the fires of wars, the serene blue of the oceans. You are a watcher, a silent guardian. You are not dropping bombs. You are bringing back the truth. In the Cold War, truth was the only thing that prevented the world from turning into ash. The photos taken by the Blackbird proved that the missile silos were empty or that the troops were not moving. It de-escalated crises. It prevented wars. The weapon was the camera, and its ammunition was light. The Blackbird flew for over 3 decades. It saw the jungles of Vietnam, the deserts of the Middle East, the frozen tundras of the Soviet border. It was fired upon over 4,000 times. 4,000 missiles chased this bird. 4,000 times the guidance systems locked on, the rocket motors ignited, and the warheads sought their prey. And 4,000 times they failed. Not a single SR-71 was ever lost to enemy fire. It was invincible. It was a ghost. It was a legend. But time is the one enemy that speed cannot defeat. Satellites became cheaper, better. They didn't need pilots. They didn't risk lives. They could orbit 24/7. The Blackbird was expensive. It required a massive support fleet of tankers, specialized fuel, and an army of mechanics who worked like watchmakers on a steam locomotive. The politics shifted. The funding dried up. The decision was made to put the wings of the Habu. The retirement flights were funerals for a living god. Pilots wept. Mechanics who had spent their lives keeping the oil-weeping beast alive touched the titanium skin one last time. When the last SR-71 at the Smithsonian, it set a speed record on the way there, just to remind the world one last time what it was losing. It flew from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. in 64 minutes. It averaged 2,124 miles per hour. The sonic boom rolled across the continent, a thunderclap of farewell. Now, they sit in museums. They are cold. They do not leak fuel anymore. The titanium has dulled. Children press their faces against the barriers, looking at the strange, flat shapes, the chines, the massive engines. They read the plaques. Top speed, Mach 3 pause. Service sailing, 85 plus feet. The numbers seem abstract, impossible. But for the men who flew them, the memory is visceral. They remember the kick of the afterburner. They remember the purple sky. They remember the fear in the gut when the RSO called missile launch. And they remember the silence of the cruise, the feeling of being the fastest thing that ever lived. The SR-71 was more than a machine. It was the pinnacle of the analog age. It was built with slide rules and intuition, hammered out of impossible metal by men who didn't know the meaning of cannot. It was a time when we reached for the impossible and grabbed it with both hands. It was a testament to the fact that if you build a machine fast enough, you can outrun anything, even your own shadow. But you can never outrun the memory. The Blackbird still flies in the minds of those who saw it, a black shape tearing through the heavens, forever fast, forever free, forever the king of the sky. Imagine the cockpit one last time. The mission is over. You are descending. The sky turns from black to gray. The heat fades. The metal contracts, groaning and pinging. You line up the runway. The drag chute deploys. A blossom of orange against the gray runway. You taxi in. The engines wind down, the scream fading to a whine, then silence. The canopy opens. The humid air hits you. You are back on Earth. You are immortal again. But for a few hours, you were something else. You were a rider of the storm. You were the sled driver. And no matter what happens for the rest of your life, you know one thing with absolute certainty. You have been higher, faster, and louder than anyone else on the planet. And that is a fire that never goes out. Even today, in the quiet corners of the internet, in the dusty archives of the Air Force, the data logs exist. They show the traces of the battles, the spike in engine temperature as the throttle hit the stop, the erratic heartbeat of the pilot as the missile warning wailed, the grainy, high-contrast photos of Soviet submarines and North Korean troop movements. These are the fossils of the Blackbird's war. A war fought not with explosions, but with shutter clicks and sonic booms. A war where the only victory condition was coming home alive. There is a particular kind of loneliness to the Blackbird pilot. You are separated from the world not just by altitude, but by speed. You are moving so fast that you are effectively living in a different time frame than the people below you. You pass over a country in minutes. You see a storm system that covers half a continent, and you are past it before you can finish a thought. You are a time traveler. You are seeing the world as the gods. See it? A small, blue marble, fragile and undivided. The borders on the maps are invisible from 80,000 feet. The politics are invisible. There is only the geography, the physics, and the machine. And the machine was demanding. It required a symbiotic relationship. You didn't just fly the SR-71, you wore it. You felt its vibrations in your spine. You sensed its moods. Some days, she was smooth, cutting through the thin air like a hot knife. Other days, she was cranky, the inlet spiking, the engine surging, fighting you every inch of the way. You had to respect her. If you got complacent, she would kill you. If you got arrogant, she would humiliate you. But it treated her with the reverence she demanded. She would give you the keys to the kingdom. She would give you the stars. The legacy of the SR-71 is not just in the records it set, but in the spirit it represented. It was built in an era of existential threat, where the fear of nuclear annihilation drove men to do the impossible. It was a tool of peace forged in the fires of the Cold War. It kept the superpowers honest. It prevented the miscalculations that could have ended civilization. In that sense, the Blackbird was the most important aircraft ever built. It didn't win a dogfight. It didn't drop a nuke. It saved the world by simply watching it. So when you look at the black shape in the museum, don't just see a plane. See the thousands of men and women who designed it, built it, maintained it, and flew it. See the titanium mining operations in the secret corners of the world. See the chemistry labs where they invented the fuel. See the lonely nights at Groom Lake and Edwards Air Force Base. See the pilots in their pressure suits, walking out to the jet like knights in armor. See the fear. See the courage. See the speed. The story of the SR-71 is a story of human limit. We pushed the materials to their limit. We pushed the engines to their limit. We pushed the pilots to their limit. And we found that the limit was much further out than we thought. We found that we could fly at the edge of space. We found that we could outrun missiles. We found that we could build a machine that looked like it came from the future and flew like it came from a dream. The battles are over now. The skies are filled with drones and satellites. The roar of the J-58 is a memory. But if you listen closely, on a quiet night in the high desert, you can almost hear it. The distant crack of a sonic boom. The phantom scream of a turbo J. Bird is gone, but the echo remains. It is a reminder of what we were once capable of. It is a challenge to the future. Catch me if you can. The silence of the museum is heavy, but it is a respectful silence. The SR-71 rests, its mission complete. It is a warrior sleeping on its shield. The oil pans underneath it catch the last few drops of history. The dust motes dance in the light that falls on the cockpit canopy. Somewhere, deep in the avionics bay, the ghost of a machine spirit lingers. It remembers the cold of the stratosphere. It remembers the heat of the re-entry. It remembers the missiles, and it smiles, a titanium smile, knowing that it won the race. It remains, to this day, the undefeated champion of the sky. The one, the only, the Blackbird.